Voilà, bonjour à toutes et à tous et merci de votre présence en cette troisième et dernière demi-journée de conférence sous le titre des Écritures du monde, un cycle, comme vous le savez, issu d'une collaboration entre l'École et la Fondation Baudemer qui ont les deux en commun un intérêt majeur, comme vous le savez, pour le signe écrit, le texte, sa mise en page et sa matérialité. Cet après-midi, une sélection de projets éditoriaux et typographiques de fin d'études, des projets de diplôme principalement, seront présentés par des alumni des programmes Bachelor Design Graphique et du Master Type Design de l'École. Les projets que nous vous proposons de découvrir seront centrés sur les rapports entre langue et culture et transmission écrite et par conséquent sur le rôle de l'écriture, de son pouvoir et de son rapport au monde. Bien que les projets évoquent les trois notions de la linguistique fondamentale selon Ferdinand de Saussure, à savoir langage, langue et parole, nous verrons surtout comment les sujets choisis prennent une forme graphique. La notion de transmission est comprise ici, donc, dans sa matérialité, c'est-à-dire le passage à l'objet imprimé, le dessin de caractères typographiques et les technologies numériques utilisées, ainsi que dans sa dimension intellectuelle, sociale et culturelle. Les projets explorent les formes dans lesquelles la langue peut se matérialiser, ils leur donnent chair et surtout, ils lui permettent de se donner à lire, d'exister en tant que tel, de façon autonome et ainsi pour un lecteur ou une lectrice. Avec quelques 150 000 ouvrages, l'écrit, comme vous le savez, est au cœur des collections et des expositions de la Fondation Baudemer. Le livre comme objet porteur de sens, dans ses composantes et sa matérialité, a été le modèle et le support prédominant de l'enseignement depuis des siècles. Sa forme a déterminé une organisation des savoirs et un mode d'accès aux connaissances. Nous savons que le livre permet de rapprocher les peuples autour d'un héritage universel tout en préservant et en valorisant leur diversité culturelle. Pour certains et certaines, les médias numériques ont modifié en profondeur les modes de production et de transmission par l'écrit. Mais tout comme les objets imprimés, nous verrons aussi comment les technologies contemporaines peuvent contribuer à la pérennité d'une culture, d'une langue à travers leur transmission, mais aussi leur possible évolution. Je m'appelle Angelo Benedetto, je suis le responsable du Bachelor Design Graphique et j'ai le plaisir donc de faire office de MC cet après-midi. Nous avons l'occasion de voir en présence les auteurs et autrices de ces projets nous les présenter, mis à part deux projets, celui de Sergei et de Shuhui, qui sont malheureusement à distance. Sergei est positif au Covid et donc il a enregistré sa présentation. Et Shuhui, pour des questions de décalage horaire, elle est à Shanghai, c'était impossible de la faire venir et de la présenter, on va dire, en direct. Donc, les présentations se feront en partie en français, en partie en anglais. Donc, il faudra jongler avec ces deux langues. À nouveau, c'est un petit peu le modèle qu'on a aujourd'hui, ce mélange de cultures, et ça fait partie aussi de ça. Parallèlement à cette présentation, je ne sais pas si vous avez eu l'occasion d'aller voir en bas les ateliers d'impression taille 12 qui sont proposés par Alessandro Longo de l'atelier Verso à Lausanne, ainsi que Nicolas Régamet de l'atelier Typo de la Cité. Nous allons aller directement dans le vif du sujet. Je passe la parole à Clio Hadjigeorgiou qui va nous parler de son projet.
Merci beaucoup. Voilà. Merci beaucoup pour l'invitation et pour votre présence. Aujourd'hui, j'aimerais vous présenter le dialecte grec chypriote à travers mon diplôme Cypriot Sketch, un lexique et dictionnaire phraséologique du dialecte chypriote qui a été initié pendant mon projet de diplôme en design graphique. Si vous me permettez, j'aimerais faire cette présentation en anglais car mon travail s'est déjà traduit. S'il y a des questions à la fin, je serai plus qu'heureuse de les répondre en français. Before talking about my book, it is essential to have a quick overview of the island and its a brief language history. So Cyprus, its capital is Nicosia, and it has 9,255 kilometers square, nearly 1 million population, and there are two official languages, which is Greek and Turkish, with minority languages of Armenian and Cypriot Arabic. there are two dialects, which is the Cypriot Greek and the Cypriot Turkish. And we've got also ethnic groups, which are the Greek Cypriots, Turkish Cypriots, Armenian Cypriots, and Maronite Cypriots. Similarly to the case of Switzerland, with the Swiss German and German, Greek Cypriots have their dialect, which differs very much from the official language. Usually it is only used for everyday conversations. So all the official documents and talks are supposedly to be in Greek. For Greek speakers might be quite difficult to follow, as one of the main reasons is the difference in the vocabulary of words that are adapted from the dialect from other languages. Many as well as myself before consider our dialect as an incorrect and improper way or even informal way of speaking. However, at some point I realized that this dialect hides behind it our history and therefore is worth the studying. So let's jump. I have categorized the historic language of the island into three parts. So we can see that in the ancient history, we have the Achaeans that they passed over the island, then the Assyrians, Egyptians, Ptolemies of Egypt, Arabs, and Byzantines at the early after Christ. And then for the medieval history, we've got the Franks, Venetians, and Ottomans. And for the contemporary history, we've got the British colony and the Turkish, that they're still up to today on the island. So all these empires and conquerors left many traces on the island, and one of them, of course, is the linguistic elements. So why is the Greek Cypriot dialect so different from the Greek? I divided this into three categories, which is the lexical borrowing, the syntax, and the phonetics. The lexical borrowing means in linguistics that it's the vocabulary adapted or somehow changed and from like borrowing words from other languages and applying them into the language itself. And we have in the Cypriot dialect the ancient Greek, Latin, French, Italian, Arabic, Turkish, and English. I have demonstrated some examples. So we've got in the ant, which is limburos, which comes from the ancient Greek liburos. Then we've got vagla, which is from a Latin baculum. We've got bouillota, which is from the French bouillotte. We've got bodilla, which is the bottle in bodilla in Italian. And cow, gazzella, which comes from the Arabic gazal. We've got kelle, from the Turkish kelle, which is the head. And of course the English to park, parcaro. Then it's also the second category, I would say, is the syntax that comes from the simplifying language. So we have this tendency of taking two words together and just creating another word, giving another meaning. So for example, we've got kartamothoro. It comes from, the direct translation is cardamom sing, and it's a combination of cardamo, a cardamom, and thoro, to see. And then it just gets even more simplified. It comes from the ancient Greek theoro. Through my research, I had the chance to also discover so many layers of this language that hide so much of history and sociological elements. For example, this word, I was amazed because I found out that before they thought that when you eat a lot of cardamom, you start having hallucinations or saying stupid things or just saying nonsense. So it is quite interesting to see all this like this path of storytelling. Another example, it's the campanocchialos. It comes from the campana, the bell, from the Italian and the Latin. And then kelle, from, as we saw before, the Turkish head. It means bell-headed. And it is used to say that someone is just being full and has bells in the head and he cannot focus or he cannot be present. Later, the third category I will talk about is the phonetics, which again we have this kind of difference in the sounds. So, for example, in Greek they use the s, and in Cypriot dialect we have the sh. So, for example, skepazo, and in Cypriot we say shepazo. We have the sound ts, which is tsai in Greek. In Cypriot we say chai. Then we have the sound z, and we say it ch. So, for example, dzami, jami. The double K, so the emphasis on the vowel. So, for example, kokalo and kokalo. And yeah, I think this for me these are the words, the three sort of elements that differentiate the dialect with the language, with official language. So this, going back to my work, the Greek Cypriot dialect was broadcasted for the very first time on the radio show called Cypriot Sketches in 1953, when the island first radio station was established by the British colony. These Cypriot sketches are exclusively acoustic performance plays, which draw themes from Cypriot rural life, traditions, and customs, revealing aspects of the island's social history. I have contacted one of the first authors of these radio plays, and with his permission, I used his stories as a base to a playful analysis of the linguistic elements of the dialect. These radio performances have different characters, and dialogues between them are divided into several scenes. All dialogues and analysis are combined with English for a wider understanding. However, the idea is to give a slightly direct translation of these conversations rather than just its meaning. Within the dialogues, there are some graphic shapes that symbolizes the three elements of my analysis, which are divided into compound words, proverbs and expressions, and loan words. The circled marked words are what is called in linguistics the compound words, what we already saw, the two words joined together. This is typical Cypriot tendency of simplifying the language. And the idea here is to show the development of the words that are being combined together, even between different languages, and reveal their new meanings. Here is another example of these compound words, is the xerokefaya, that comes from the Greek xero, which is the draughty, and kefaya from the head. And again, it means when someone, it just doesn't agree with anyone. I also use these graphical elements to kind of play with the reader. So, for example, I used images that kind of have this game of ribut en français, that I try to invite the reader to play himself in the process. So, for example, I used the image of milk and figs, because we've got this word called galosica, which is the milk, this liquid coming out of the fruit when it is cut off. So for me, it was very interesting, this process, because through these stories and analysis, they were like hidden and again hidden in layers of these stories. Then there is the second analytical part, which is the proverbs and expressions used in the Cypriot dialect, that they were still found in these dialogues, these radio plays. In the English text, they're given into a more direct translation to trigger the curiosity of the reader in finding out what its meaning might be. Most of these proverbs are approached to satire and humor to describe situations or to narrate wise thoughts, arguments, or advices. I have chosen to accompany this category with simple graphic still life photography of domestic objects. These everyday objects are carefully chosen as they are basic objects that can be translated into any language. And can be explained in a more playful way that they use back to this game between the language and the multilingual type of my work. This is one of my favorite phrase. It's a head and a razor, and we have this expression called like head, like razor. So you usually say this to someone when they don't accept to do what it is proposed. This is another one quite wise, is a cucumber and a wonky ruler, which the phrase can be translated, it's dos tu pelu anguri na su pipo se zavo. It means give to the fool a cucumber and they will say that it's crocked. And usually it means that instead of being thankful of giving something out, people complain. And of course, there are several other type of expressions. And for the last part of the book is a lexicon of these loan words and their derivatives, which they're all sorted alphabetically, as some of them they're multiple times found in the radio plays. And these words are translated into all languages and that are related to the dialect, as we said the languages before. What makes it interesting in these words are translated not from the language's derivative word, but from the Cypriot meaning itself. And somehow it is also becomes a linguistic demonstration and of the links between these languages. To conclude with, throughout the book, throughout each story, each phrase, each word, there is another layer underneath it, and there is another story behind it to be narrated, similar to the Cypriot dialect that hides a series of historical events and elements of our society and culture. Thank you.
Peleo, Oruku, Mini Laura Issé, Atipe, Emiyu, Safian Fon ou Ilana, Ti Iwe Oko Bachelor Mi Diccionario Lukumí-Español. Ça signifie bonjour à tous, je m'appelle Laura Issé. Je vais vous présenter mon travail de bachelor de l'École qui s'intitule Diccionario Lukumí-Español. Cette image, c'est une des premières images sur laquelle je suis tombée quand je suis partie à Cuba dans le cadre de mon travail. Et contrairement à ce que beaucoup de gens ont pensé, en fait, il ne s'agit pas d'un point levé, en fait, de revendication des luttes noires. En fait, c'est une position des mains qui fait partie, en fait, de tout un rituel musical utilisé, en fait, dans la santeria. Donc, en fait, c'est une position qu'on utilise, en fait, pour jouer de la musique. Pour commencer un peu, j'ai commencé mon travail avec ce terme de transfuge, qui est pour moi un sentiment dont je pense que beaucoup d'immigrés et d'enfants d'immigrés sentent. Et en fait, moi je le prends dans le sens du mot trahison. ce qui est un peu un mot fort, mais un mot que je pense que beaucoup de personnes peuvent s'identifier à ça. Et ça, c'est les définitions en fait, de transfuge qui, moi, me parlent. En fait. Le fait de fuir quelque chose, de changer de milieu, de situation, de changer de pays, de lieu, ce qui a été un peu... ces trois, en fait, convergent et puis parlent de mon histoire personnelle. Je suis originaire de pas mal d'endroits. L'histoire de ma famille est assez complexe et un des lieux dont je viens, en fait, est l'Angola. Et l'Angola a eu des relations assez fortes, des relations politiques assez fortes avec Cuba. Et dans ce cadre-là, parce qu'il faisait partie, en fait, du même bloc soviétique, dans ce cadre-là, beaucoup d'étudiants, dont mon père, ont eu l'occasion, en fait, de pouvoir aller faire une partie de leurs études à Cuba. Donc mon père est parti à Cuba dans les années 70 et c'était pour étudier. Je pense que c'était aussi un peu pour la beauté des femmes cubaines. Et il y avait aussi un peu une histoire familiale qu'il avait essayé de retisser. Et les photos que vous voyez en bas, c'est une partie de notre histoire, de notre famille en fait, dont il a retrouvé la trace à Cuba, qui est un peu le point de départ de mon travail. Donc j'avais une forte envie de partir de la Suisse à un moment donné. J'avais pas tout à fait envie de retourner en Angola d'où je venais. Et pour moi, Cuba, c'était un peu un espèce d'entre-deux qui regroupait aussi un peu une partie de notre histoire familiale. Donc, le point de départ de mon travail a été la Santeria, ou Regla de Oshaifa, Regla de Lukumi ou Lukumi tel qu'il est orthographié parfois. La traite négrière qui est à Cuba, en fait, est datée entre le XVIe et le XIXe siècle. Et pas mal d'esclaves furent déportés d'Afrique, c'était beaucoup principalement d'Afrique de l'Ouest, vers Cuba. Et ils emportèrent avec eux, en fait, sur l'île, pas mal de leurs croyances animistes. Et arrivés sur l'île et face à la répression par rapport à leurs croyances, ils se mirent à dissimuler, en fait, pas mal de leurs dieux à travers sous un catholicisme, en fait, qui était imposé par l'île. Donc, pas mal d'éléments du catholicisme. Les esclaves africains, en fait, ont dissimulé certains de leurs dieux et ça donnait une espèce de religion syncrétique, un mélange de tout ça. Et donc, des tribus comme les Araras et les Lukumi s'organisèrent en association. Et avec le temps, un étonnant métissage entre catholicisme et ses croyances africaines ont donné ce qu'on appelle justement ces religions afro-cubaines dans la Santeria, qui est en fait un culte secret qui est originaire des Yoruba d'Afrique de l'Ouest et qui était uniquement pratiqué par les esclaves en leur temps. La Santeria est basée sur un panthéon de dieux africains qui sont créés à l'image des hommes. Il y a beaucoup de rituels liturgiques. Comme je vous ai dit, il y a accompagné beaucoup de tambours, de chants, de musique, de danse. En fait, c'est une croyance qui est très, très festive. En général, les rituels ont lieu en fait, dans les Casas de Santos, mais chacun en fait, peut lui-même créer comme un hôtel chez lui et ensuite vénérer le dieu en fait, qui lui parle le plus. Oui, pardon. Donc pour résumer un peu, il y a une hybridation des coutumes religieuses africaines avec des aspects du catholicisme romain. Il y a un dieu suprême qui s'appelle Olodumare, qui est un peu l'énergie spirituelle de l'univers. On a les rituels, les cérémonies et les initiations qui ont lieu dans des Casas de Santos, mais aussi dans la rue. Quand on va à Cuba, c'est des choses qu'on voit et qu'on entend. Il y a pas mal de pratiques traditionnelles de guérison par une approche holistique, donc pas mal de plantes médicinales, de l'ethnomédecine, l'herboristerie, de l'homéopathie, la psychologie, et on a ce qu'on appelle un babalao, donc un médium conseiller spirituel qui est un peu l'élément intercédant entre les orishas, donc les dieux, et les humains. Le Lukumi, donc langue vernaculaire, expérimentale, interdite, sacrée, rituelle, secrète, ça c'est tous les termes dont les gens me parlaient en fait quand ils me parlaient de cette langue. Il faut savoir qu'à Cuba, l'espagnol est la langue principale, elle est parlée par 90% de la population, donc il y a une certaine homogénéité, mais on voit aussi à Cuba qu'une bonne partie de la population afro-cubaine qui existe, qui est là, on ne recense pas forcément en fait, les langues que les afro-cubains parlent dans le Lukumi. Donc la langue Yoruba n'est pas une langue vernaculaire parmi les descendants des Yoruba. Et en fait, c'est surtout une langue qui s'est développée avec la pratique de la santeria. Donc en tant que telle, c'est pas une langue à proprement parler, mais elle ne doit pas non plus souffrir en fait, d'un statut de subalterne. En fait, c'est vraiment une langue à part entière. Voilà. Donc Lidia Cabrera, c'est une anthropologue, ethnologue, écrivain et activiste cubaine qui a été la première à recenser en fait, les croyances afro-cubaines et les rituels et à les aborder sous un angle socio-anthropologique et culturel et non plus comme un objet de curiosité et d'exotisme, parce que ces religions étaient très très mal vues. Il y a eu beaucoup de répression aussi par rapport aux personnes croyantes en fait, de la santeria notamment. Et donc Lidia Cabrera était une des premières en fait, à redonner un peu des lettres de noblesse en fait, à toutes ces croyances, à les faire inscrire en fait, aussi culturellement dans le patrimoine cubain. En fait, et maintenant, c'est vraiment devenu quelque chose qui fait partie de l'île, en fait, fait partie de l'âme de l'île. Elle pose aussi la question de savoir si la langue a un rôle identitaire. Et c'est une interrogation qui remonte depuis qu'on codifie en fait, les langues sous forme de dictionnaire ou bien de grammaire. Parce qu'il y a toujours, on entend souvent cet adage qui dit une langue, un peuple, une nation, mais que faire dans ce cas, dans le cas de langues comme le Lukumi, en fait, qui sont un peu entre deux. Donc, l'une des théories, en fait, ce serait que c'est pas forcément la langue qui témoigne des spécificités culturelles, mais plutôt le discours. Donc, pour le dire autrement, ce ne sont pas les mots dans leur morphologie ni les règles de syntaxe qui sont porteurs de culture, mais tout autant les manières de parler de chaque communauté, donc les façons d'employer les mots, les manières de raisonner, de raconter, même la manière de séduire, en fait, est un marqueur culturel. Et c'est dans ce sens, en fait, que le Lukumi, en fait, une langue discursive, en fait, qui porte son histoire en son sein. Et la symbolique de l'identité, la singularité d'une communauté à travers sa langue repose sur plusieurs notions, dont celle de filiation. Et cette notion de filiation dit que les membres d'une communauté linguistique, ils sont comptables de l'héritage qu'ils reçoivent du passé. Et dans le cas du Lukumi, il y a une appartenance très très forte à une histoire, une descendance en fait coloniale qu'on ne saurait cacher ou rejeter. Donc voilà à peu près comment est-ce que le Lukumi voit le jour. En fait, on part en fait, de langues négro-africaines qui ont une racine bantoue, donc plutôt d'Afrique, Afrique de l'Ouest. On a le Yoruba d'Afrique, les esclaves l'importent, ça devient le Yoruba de Cuba. Ensuite, Yoruba de Cuba mélangé à de l'espagnol et c'est ce qui donne le Lukumi. Donc là, on a les différences en fait, de prononciation et d'écriture aussi en fait, entre le Yoruba d'Afrique et le Lukumi. Une vidéo. Ah mince, je ne suis pas connectée à Internet. Bon, c'est pas grave. Très bien. Ah, oui, c'est gentil.
Ara ọ̀run.
Araye.
Araye.
Egun.
Eégún.
Ikú ló bí ọ̀chà.
Ikú ló bọ̀ṣà.
Mojúbà.
Mojúbà.
Mo dúpẹ́.
Mo dúpẹ́.
Mo forí balẹ̀.
Mo forí balẹ̀.
Omi tútù, àná tútù, ilẹ̀ tútù.
Omi tútù, ọ̀nà tútù, ilẹ̀ tútù.
Donc, voilà un peu phonétiquement ce que ça donne. Et puis, sur place, j'ai travaillé avec un linguiste parce que Lydia Cabrera, qui est cette ethnologue dont je parlais, en fait, est aussi celle qui a fait en fait, le premier dictionnaire Lukumí-Español dans les années 70. Et il en reste qu'un exemplaire sur l'île. Et donc mon travail en fait était un peu de réactualiser en fait cet élément qui manque cruellement en fait dans la communauté Yoruba qui pratique la santeria. Et j'ai travaillé avec Nolan Paparelli, un designer graphique, état designer de l'École, avec lequel en fait on a essayé de jouer un peu avec des lettres pour essayer d'accentuer aussi une certaine musicalité, d'essayer d'imaginer un peu une musicalité. Et étant donné aussi qu'il y a énormément d'accents et de ponctuation en fait dans le Lukumi, on s'est dit qu'en fait jouer justement, de redessiner la ponctuation, les accents en les affinant, en fait c'était aussi un élément qui les faisait tout à fait complètement ressortir soudainement. En fait c'était comme un élément graphique qui devenait quelque chose à part entière en fait par rapport à cette langue. Et pour donner un peu une idée. Voilà un peu pour rendre un peu tout ça un peu plus musical. Ce qui est assez troublant et en même temps assez beau de voir en fait dans cette vidéo, c'est que en fait, ces 2 dernières décennies, il y a eu pas mal de crises assez graves à Cuba. Et la santeria, en fait, malgré le fait que ce soit une religion assez complexe, a renoué avec une certaine vigueur, en fait, beaucoup d'adeptes aussi qui n'étaient pas du tout portés sur ces questions-là. Et c'est aussi assez troublant de voir justement en fait la manière dont les populations afro-cubaines, qui comptent environ 11% en fait sur l'île, sont en général plutôt invisibilisées, c'est-à-dire qu'aujourd'hui encore, c'est des populations qui ne sont pas représentées dans les lieux de pouvoir, qui n'ont pas les mêmes accès à l'emploi, qui n'ont pas les mêmes chances non plus, même au niveau de l'espérance de vie, en fait, les populations afro-cubaines sont vraiment en deçà. Et quand on va à Cuba, c'est impossible de passer à côté en fait de la santeria. On voit les femmes, ces gens qui sont habillés en blanc, on entend la musique en fait, et c'est vraiment une espèce de réappropriation aussi de la culture afro-cubaine en fait, qui est visibilisée de façon vraiment très très colorée et puis très très musicale. Donc le Lukumi en fait c'est une de ces langues quand on parle en fait d'hybridation linguistique. Donc c'est pas du code switching, donc c'est-à-dire que c'est pas quelque chose dont on parle en fait, tout à coup on parle en espagnol et on va switcher en Lukumi. En fait on essaie vraiment de faire comprendre que c'est une langue à part entière, bien qu'elle soit utilisée dans un contexte particulier, à savoir qu'en fait on l'utilise que lorsqu'on est en pleine pratique en fait de la santeria. Et en fait, malgré ça, les adeptes en fait ne veulent vraiment faire comprendre qu'en fait c'est pas une langue qui a un statut subalterne, c'est pas une interlangue en fait, c'est une langue à part entière. ce phénomène en fait un des aspects en fait de cette hybridation linguistique, Fernando Ortiz, qui est c'est un ethnologue cubain en fait, l'a théorisé en fait sous la théorie de la transculturation. Et donc en anthropologie, la transculturation, c'est un processus par lequel une communauté emprunte certains matériaux à la culture majoritaire pour se les approprier et les façonner à son propre usage. Donc le Lukumi est en fait une réappropriation linguistique. Et ce processus, il concerne justement les rapports entre communautés marginales et dominantes, minoritaires, majoritaires, subordonnées et dominantes. Et donc le concept de transculturation s'oppose à celui d'acculturation, qui est plus ancien et qui désigne justement l'absorption de la minorité par la culture dominante. Donc ce qui est plutôt demandé en général, c'est justement d'arriver dans un endroit et puis de se fondre en fait dans le paysage environnant. Et dans le cas de la Santeria et du Lukumi, c'est assez marquant de voir en fait que c'est devenu même un élément justement qui fait partie de l'identité de Cuba, et de voir à quel point en fait ces populations ont réussi à finalement complètement retourner l'historique en fait par rapport à ces questions. Donc pour arriver à mon travail, donc c'était assez compliqué pour moi parce que le fait d'avoir été sur le terrain et d'avoir rencontré beaucoup de pratiquants de la Santeria, beaucoup de babalao, donc de prêtres et des linguistes, en fait le médium livre apparaissait être une des pires idées en fait finalement à réaliser en fait, parce que moi la raison pour laquelle j'ai fait ce travail, c'était justement parce que je rencontrais pas mal de classes générationnelles entre des gens plus anciens qui tentaient de transmettre en fait à une génération un peu plus jeune toutes ces croyances en fait qui sont aussi porteurs de leur identité, et la jeunesse était pas très portée en fait sur le médium livre. C'est aussi un contexte qui est très très compliqué à Cuba. Vous n'allez pas tomber sur des imprimeurs à tous les coins de rue. Donc c'est vrai que les médiums livres aussi est un médium qui est assez compliqué à mettre en place. Et donc c'est aussi le fait qu'en fait il y a toute une tradition de l'oralité, c'est-à-dire que les choses se transmettent en fait de façon orale, c'est-à-dire que beaucoup de rites, de prières, de formules, de potions, de recettes médicinales en fait sont transmises de famille en famille de façon orale. Et donc le médium livre fait pas vraiment sens en fait. Chaque personne dans les familles où on pratique la Santeria a un petit carnet où il va noter en fait des choses qui font sens pour lui en fait, mais d'avoir tel que moi je l'ai fait en fait, qui est comme une espèce de bible un peu de cette pratique en fait, était pas très était pas très logique en fait dans un contexte cubain, et ça je l'ai constaté quand j'y suis retournée en fait, toute contente d'amener mon livre sur place et en fait de constater que les gens n'en faisaient pas usage. Et donc suite à ça, j'ai essayé de travailler avec un développeur, et en fait on a fait plusieurs versions d'une application qui contenait en fait le dictionnaire, et une application en fait qui fonctionnait aussi sans internet, parce qu'il y a aussi pas mal maintenant un peu moins, mais au début quand j'allais à Cuba, il y avait pas mal de problèmes de connexion, donc les gens n'avaient pas accès à internet en fait, ou ils vont dans des hotspots dans la rue, et donc c'est un peu compliqué en fait la connexion là-bas. Donc l'idée c'était de faire une application qui puisse, qui renferme en fait tout le dictionnaire, et dont en fait les gens ont juste à sélectionner en fait les mots dont ils ont envie d'avoir la définition, et puis en fait et donc de constituer en fait des dictionnaires un peu personnels comme ça, et après vous avez la possibilité de l'imprimer. Et on a fait des versions beaucoup plus complexes aussi en fait de cette application, qui en fait c'était toujours quelque chose qui revenait beaucoup de simplicité, ce qui est aussi très confrontant en fait, je trouve, en tant que designer, c'est-à-dire que pas mal de fois en fait on me posait la question de savoir ce que nous en tant qu'occidentaux on pouvait faire en fait pour aider finalement ces populations, et la question inverse ne se pose pas toujours en fait, c'est-à-dire qu'on arrive avec pas mal de questions, ces questions de design, on essaie toujours un peu de complexifier le propos, et en fait c'est des populations qui sont vraiment dans une forme de simplicité qui est très très inspirante. Et donc voilà les derniers développements en fait par rapport à ce travail. Et donc voilà.
Hello, I'm Norma Elzoghbi, and I was born in Lebanon, but I also lived in the States. So going from the west to the east was quite a cultural clash. And so I saw society with a different pair of lenses. And today I'll be speaking about secularism in a sectarian city. We have to map out the city so that you can understand how segregated Beirut was. So from 1975 to 1977, you have something called the Green Line, which separated the Muslims and the Christians. And from that, you have different electoral districts, and every sect had different religious sects, which gave put to different political sects. And so my question and what I was interested in asking for my project at the final year in my bachelor's was, how did such a divided country collectively express themselves? And was it possible for two different political and religious sects to use the same script to riot? And so I wanted to delve into the calligraphy and status in Arabic script. And we're going to go into the main ones. So you have Nasikh script, which means copy. And it replaced the predecessor Kufic. It was used to copy the Quran. And then we moved to Thulith, which was used in medieval times on mosque decorations. Diwani, which was used to write confidential governmental documents because of its complexity, you can retain secrecy. Kufi was also used to copy the Quran. And then you had a script called Ruqa. And this is what I was interested in defining the social ideology of Ruqa. Because when we go back into the protests, we see this pattern of people using this script. People coming from completely different backgrounds and cultures and religious and political sects, because the city is so segregated. And as you can see, it's the same script being used. And people were conscious about their decision in using this script to really protest against the parliament, because that's all we had in common was the rage we had towards the government. And people were sick of talk of war and talk of sectarianism and talk of an elite that couldn't understand the gravity of the situation and of the city's tragedy. And so here there's a case study where you see in the beginning, he says in the Nasikh script, breaking news, and he's directing it to a political elite. And right below it, he changes his script on the same paper to the Ruqa script, and he says, why hasn't he stepped down yet? And he changes his script because he's conscious that this is how he can relate to the people, and this is how he speaks to the elite. And more of another example, also in the Arab region in Egypt, you have in the newspaper, this is the time of the revolution, and this very famous newspaper, actually, they were putting out an issue to say that people were revolting against their government. And at the time, the picture on your left, they used a font that was found in the digital computer at the time, and the editor thought that it wasn't enough to reach out to the people. And so he actually called the calligrapher like 12 at midnight, and he said, I need you to come down to the studio, and I need you to write my main headline in the Ruqa script, because that's how I can grab the attention of the people. And so they had to change the edition, and there was an article written about this because of how it became the identity of the people. So Ruqa then became the manifestation of the art scene in Beirut, eradicating all social class. And as you can see, it was used in supermarket signage, in street signage, in residential areas, in restaurants, on wall art, on trucks. One day in Beirut and you will spot it everywhere, being used by everyone, regardless of their class, regardless of who you are and where you come from. So how did it originate as the people's script? It originated that from the educational sector because it was taught in school curriculums, and that's how you learned how to write in Arabic. And then I jumped to type design as a social ideology, and if we look back in the course of history and time, many political campaigns used type to promote their brand identities. So instead of it being to represent nationalism or fascism or socialism, what if a type can be a secular ideology? And so this is what I wanted to do, and that's why I went into Arabic type design, and I began to be more familiar with its origin, understanding its anatomy, and really understanding Ruqa and the way that people were writing it. When I jumped into Glyphs, which is the type design software, I wanted to work against the digital restraints because I didn't want to do something too mechanical so that it would be too contemporary that people cannot, feel something towards. So I thought that it was important to design a typeface that had this fast-paced, handwritten feel to it that still retained. On Glyphs, you can't have a slanted baseline. So I really had to work on these type features that could mimic the calligraphic motion that you have in the type. And my main project was just to show that, type design can also be a social ideology, and I wanted it to have a digital accessibility for people if you want to protest, because now everything is online. And so I wanted to bring Ruqa to a contemporary audience. And that was it. Thank you.
So, staying in the digital world of the Arabic script, there also exists a phenomenon which deals more with how people communicate on a daily basis and the script that they use to do so. And in this case specifically, it's also about the role technology has to play with the way we communicate and how that sort of resonates with speech patterns. And so there's a trend that exists in Lebanon, but that also exists in other countries where the script is non-Latin, which is to actually write in the Latin script. So this is basically Arabic, if you look at it. But it's also Arabic with some French, with some English, and that's because of the multilingualism of Beirut and of Lebanon. And so even though this is something that does exist with other languages in texting, for me it was more interesting to look at it in context or in parallel of how people actually speak in Beirut. And so in order to understand how people speak, you also have to understand some of the history of Lebanon, which is the fact that, these postage stamps are from the time of the French Mandate. So in 1924, if I'm not mistaken, the Lebanon was under a strict French mandate. And then it was a republic under the French Mandate in 26. And then it turned into an independent republic under, turned into an independent republic in 1942. And so little by little, French actually became an important language in Beirut. And so even though the official language is still Arabic, following the French mandate, a lot of French schools or lycées were open in Lebanon, maybe more even in the capital. And what you have to take into consideration is that a lot of Lebanese students attend private schools, which are French. And English comes in the mix because, given that it's an international language, it's actually taught starting grade 2. So by 8, most students actually speak English, French, and Arabic. And like me, a lot of students end up attending French schools and then going to English universities. So actually the levels of language are actually quite high. And this is sort of how you can start to begin understanding the mix of languages in speech. And it may be a bit taboo, but it is a fact. And this sort of creates a very specific speech pattern with code switching between languages in the same sentence and every day. And so this is also a trend that it's also reflected in the typographic landscape of Beirut, where you can see Latin and Arabic sit side by side on almost everything. And so they're always used in parallel. But this also creates an interesting combination of letter forms because sometimes the character actually resonates with each other and sometimes it's quite different. So for instance, in the last one, the Arabic has almost nothing to do with the Latin. So even graphically, sometimes it doesn't match. But in order to comprehend the signs, you should have knowledge of both alphabetic systems, which actually share no relationship between each other in terms of letter shape, to the point where even certain sounds actually don't exist in both languages. And so taking all of this information into consideration, how can a new system of signs sort of emerge that can represent Lebanese speech patterns and so include code switching in a written form? So basically, how can Arabic be represented by a combination of Latin characters? And for this, I actually went back into history a bit, and I found this one philosopher and language reformer back in the 1980s who was recognized for developing the first attempt at writing Lebanese language in Latin. And he basically advocated that the Lebanese language was distinct from Arabic. His proposed new system actually is written in modified Latin alphabet, consisting of 36 characters, including newly designed letters and accents, to accommodate phonetics unique to Lebanese. And so during the final decades of the 20th century, we see Saad Ail's sort of system come back with some differences in the code, but basically following the same principle. And that's the Arabic chat alphabet, which can also be called Arabizi, Franco-Arabic, or Arabish. And so this alphabet has many localized variants for the assorted Arabic dialects that actually use it. And the one that I'm presenting here is actually the one that I'm familiar with, so the Lebanese one. And this alphabet basically was developed organically by the people who adopted it and has become the alternative to writing standard Arabic when texting. So this phenomenon is believed to have been developed in response to the prevalence of Western technology, which initially required the use of Latin alphabet and did not support the Arabic script. So it was in fact a response to technological limitations at the time. But it's actually interesting that the system appeared in this sort of organic manner without ever really being formalized, and that it's still very much in use today, even though the Arabic script is available on our phone keyboards. And so in terms of coding or typography, there are some choices that were made which kind of seem necessary to discuss, specifically the numerals. So certain numbers are used to replace sounds that don't exist. However, when it comes to what actually becomes interesting is the uncanny resemblance between the numeral that's chosen and the Arabic counterparts. So for instance, the first one, which is a, is represented by a 2, which is a mirror, it's kind of. The ha is a 3, that's the second line. So you can kind of see actually how they resemble each other. And so the duality of that kind of helps regulate the relationship between both character sets. And it provides a counterpart that's intuitive to in nature to those who are using the system. And so this, oh, sorry for the very dark type. So this is just a kind of a quick example of how that system is used. So the first word is Arabi, and how it's used is basically, so the first letter A is 3A, the second letter, which is a Re, is RA, and the last two, which actually form B, is BH. So it's actually very intuitive in nature. And sort of to have a better illustration of the system, on the right we have basic English sentences. On the left, sorry. On the right, we have Arabic, and the center column, even though it may look Latin, is actually, in fact, Arabic. But it's this sort of transliteration that happens when texting. And actually, which is, I don't really speak Arabic very, very well, and I can't really read it very naturally. But when it comes to the middle column, I have no problem reading it whatsoever. So it creates a sort of, I don't know, a different system of Arabic. Yeah, and so basically, to come back to our initial question, so how is this tool interesting in the hands of a Lebanese speaker? It's the fact that the Arabic chat alphabet has interesting potential because of trilingual Beirut and because of the code switching that happens in Lebanese speech. And so having the system available in combination with French and English allows a visually uninterrupted flow of words. As I previously explained, the differences between Arabic and the Latin alphabet do not help when a Lebanese speaker who usually mixes in speech actually tries to do the same in writing. And so given that the Arabic chat alphabet relies solely on Latin characters, it facilitates the transition from one language to another in written form. And so that echoes the speech patterns. But what you have to keep in mind is that this is also a manifestation of the ways that technology exerts an influence on how we read and write. And the Arabic chat alphabet presents pros and cons. On the one hand, it tussles with traditional Arabic script and therefore the roots of Arabic identity. And on the other, it facilitates new forms of expression. So either way, it has gained a firm foothold in today's technological world. but it grows even more popular with younger generations of Arabic speakers. And all that because I guess this is actually how we speak. So yeah, thank you.
So the previous presentation was at the end touching on technological things. The next one, which is recorded because of time lag, Shuhui Shi being in Hanzhou near Shanghai, and it's kind of the middle of the night for her. So she kindly recorded a presentation about the ECAL project. C'est sous-titré en français. And if you have any question, I also participated to the project, so I hope I could answer the questions during the Q&A at the end. So here we go.
Hello everyone, my name is Shuhui Shi. Thanks for ECAL and Foundation Martin Baltimore to inviting me here today to talk about the project ECAL. I was graduated from ECAL in 2019 with this project. So here we have. Well, the ECAL project is a collaborative project between ECAL and EPFL. After my graduation, we took this project to a deeper step. So about the name of the project, it can be understood in 3 different ways, like artificial intelligence that generates Hanzi, or AI related some Chinese characters you couldn't read, but actually it just means Chinese characters. And then, of course, the love of typography in the Chinese way. And that's the reason why I started this project. The font I'm showing here is Source Han Sans. You can see it contains over 30,000 of characters. And most of them, like over 30,000 of them, are Chinese Hanzi. So for the Chinese type designers, we are way less competitive than the Latin type designers, because for the Chinese type designers, we need to draw over 6,000 Hanzi for one typeface, and that would took us half or 1 year to finish that. So my goal is to create an algorithm with, in the help of the artificial intelligence, then to help the type designers to draw less of the repetitive works and to more focus on their creations itself. So here are the different generations of the results we have from my diploma project. And then I will introducing you about the technology we are using at that time. Here is the technology what we call the pix-to-pix or style transfer. It can be fitted in tons of the images in different styles. Then it could be learned from these styles and apply them to a whole new image. And till now, the best usage of this technology is to generate human faces, because in this planet, human faces are kind of the easiest database we can get. In this website called This Person Does Not Exist, every time you refresh the website, then you can get a whole new image with the people that does not exist at all. So if we apply this technology to type design, that's what we can get. It is the project called the 字to字, the very first project that used style transfer in type design. So here is an experiment I did in my diploma project to use the style transfer technology to see if it fits all the styles in Chinese type design. And now we can see that only some of them are very suitable for this technology because they are more like calligraphy or human drawn styles. But for the rest, like for textbook styles, it couldn't show the straightness of the original design. So in order to solve this problem, we are trying to use the Hanzi radical system. We use this to combine and generate all the Hanzi in less than 300 radicals. And here is the layout system we have. And in this layout system, we put all the Hanzi radicals, or what we call the component, in these different bounding boxes. And also we create a database of that. For the artificial intelligence, you always need bigger database to have a better result. So we push this database to over 90,000 of characters. And here are the very, very early results we have. It is not AI generated. It is just very rough combined characters. But the funny fact is, actually, in 1937, when the Western people are trying to publish Holy Bibles in China, they are also using a very similar technology called the divisible type, trying to make the publication easier. But for the Chinese readers, these Hanzi are not very good in readabilities. So we use this technology called affine transformation to help the machine to adjust the scales of our components or radicals as what we inputted, and make them assemble together in a better proportion. And this is the model we have. And this is the training process we have. We can see the column P is the characters we generated from the machine. And the column G is what we want to achieve. And these are the average cases we have. From here, we can easily see that actually it is very close to the target what we want. And also, they are not that soft anymore. It can show the straightness of the textbook styles. And if you are interested in the EISA project, you can just visit our website, eisa.ch. It shows the project, the reason of the project, why we did it, and also some articles from the research team members. And my articles are in bilingual. And of course, the database. We released our database to everyone. And even if you are a researcher or type designer, or just interested in like how the Hanzi radical system goes, you can go there and check. For example, here you can search for all the characters that are related to this squarish radical. It means kou, mouse in China. And then our team members. And that's all. So Aizi is still an ongoing project, and we are doing our best to developing it further to get better results and to help the Chinese type design community, of course. And we hope that with our help, and of course the help of the machines, the designers can do less jobs in the future, like drawing only less than 500 characters to get all the full character set font. So that's all for today, and thank you for watching, for listening. And if you have any further questions, you can just contact me or visit our website. Thank you.
I will transmit the clap. Now, I think we're moving to another region again. Not yet. Oh yeah, not that. And also staying in video. So yes, Sergei Rasskazov, who was supposed to speak next, sent me yesterday a beautiful image of his COVID test So he's locked at home, but sent me also a video of his presentation. So, merci de votre compréhension. J'ai fait le sous-titrage en français ce matin. Il y a peut-être des fautes d'orthographe ou des choses comme ça. Je l'ai fini juste au tout début d'après-midi ici.
Hello everybody.
Oups, je vais le mettre sur la bonne. Let's go.
My name is Sergei Rasskazov. Sorry, I have to stay at home today because of COVID and I cannot be with you, but I hope I can tell you something about Cyrillic today in this video format. I born actually and grew up in Ukraine. After it I moved to Russia and studied design and work in design field, and now I am in Lausanne studying type design, and now the right thing will be to introduce myself in Ukrainian language. Вітаю! Я Сережа Расскazov. Я народився і виріс в Україні. Потім я навчався дизайну в Росії. А тепер я тут, у Лозанні. Вибачте, що я зараз змушен сидіти вдома на карантині і не можу бути разом з вами. Але я сподіваюся, що у відеоформаті я зможу вам розповісти щось про кирилицю. Today is horrible time for me and for millions of people in Ukraine. But for me it's very important to make this lecture today about Cyrillic script that connects Ukrainian and Russian people together. And I want to show you some pictures of historical part of Cyrillic and from modern time how Cyrillic looks today. Of course, I want to start my lecture from word no to war, ни войны, нет войны, in these three different languages, but well, let's go to the history. Sorry. First, I want to start from historical part. We don't know how Cyrillic looked like before 10th century. Not Cyrillic, of course, but some writing system, what it was before. Maybe it was glagolic, maybe it was something different. We don't know, because everything was destroyed. All examples of non-Christian epoch in Russian region was burned in fire, so we don't know how our script looks like before 10th century. We just know when Byzantium and Christianism come to the Bible was written originally in Greek, Untitled, and you can look how Kirill and Methody, it was first writers of Bible, first translators Bible to Russian language. They use actually the same script, the same stylistic forms, and we bring to Cyrillic a lot of from Greek. You can see it was too close to each other, and it was very difficult script. People when draw Cyrillic originally, monks in very close churches, monasteries, and they draw every letter with a lot of repetition of any stroke. For example, here is letter M. It was written in 18 strokes. Again and again, monk draw the small parts, and maybe when he draw, he meditate, and it looks like very precise letters, not speed writing. It looks like drawing. Here's just example of Ustav or Unsal, how it looks. Just alphabet. Originally in Cyrillic script and in Russian language, Proto-Russian language, was 46 letters. And you can see in the 10th century it was very complicated form. In 12th century it was simplified, but from 12th to 15th century actually Cyrillic doesn't change, doesn't evaluate, it just stay in the same form because of Mongolian invasion. 3 centuries we lost actually when Latin script changed every century and grow up, but Cyrillic stay in the same stage what it started. And because of this, book printing started in Russian region just 1 century later than in Europe. Here's first book, first Bible was printed in Kiev by Ivan Fedorov. It was printed 1 century later than in Europe started book printing. And here you can see how from writing letters copied to metal type in the same size, in the same shapes. And you can see in the top of this page this red letters. It was вязь. It was very interesting style of writing Cyrillic, like knitted something, and one part of letter started as second part of next letter, and it made very interesting ornamental words without spaces. It was difficult to read. You can see how it looks in 13th century, or for example how modern type designers, modern calligraphers use the same style of writing nowadays. For example, it was works of Oleg Matsuyev, repeats for the different styles. You can see how it looks very much different, but it was very inspirable for me. When you look to these letters, maybe you can see Arabic вязь. In Russian language we have the same word to say about Arabic. For us it was the same like вязь, something that like liquid from one letter to next letter connects. And third writing system what began in Russian region, it was speed writing. In Russian we say it скоропись, and it was civilian writing system. People just write letters to each other or something like this. It was amazing script. After 6 centuries we can see how our writing system changed, and we can see evolution of it. For example, here it was some different writing forms of the same letters, A, B, D, E, and different. But it was very interesting for me how on the same time looks Greek speed writing. We disconnected from Greek script for 6 centuries. But after 6 centuries, from the same source, after evolution of speed writing, it looks like the same script, the same feeling of the letters, the same feeling of the text. It was amazing for me, but of course in speed writing of Cyrillic it looks more expressive, but it was inspires me. It inspires me. It was pity, but in the beginning of 18th century, Peter the Great made reform of civil type, and he made a lot of mistake. It was just political decision to change everything. He invited to Russia punch cutters from Amsterdam who cannot read Russian text, who cannot write Russian letters, Cyrillic letters, and they made huge reform of Cyrillic type in just 4 years. It was crazy. You can see how it changed after just 3 years and how it looks after reform of Peter the Great. It looks really strange. He just took the same shapes from Latin script, from the script of the same time, and use these letter forms for Cyrillic, and it was very strange. For example, letter S from Latin, it's totally different from a letter Zelo from Cyrillic, from Russian language. It was letters King's Roman from France, and Peter the Great say, wow, he was emperor, he was king, he has his own typeface, and I want to typeface from Russia, my own too. And he made this. It was really, really bad work. Still, after 3 centuries, we still have a lot of problems with Cyrillic after this reform of Peter the Great. But before reform, it was totally different. We have a lot of letters, we have a lot of accent, descenders, ascenders, and it looks totally different. After it, we have half artificial alphabet, not half artificial. We read it, we feel with these letters well, and nowadays Cyrillic looks like this. It just uppercase, lowercase. It was not bad. It was good script. We can read it well. We can make typefaces well in this style. But a lot of enthusiasts, modern type designers, trying to do something with Cyrillic to change problems what made Peter the Great. For example, here was Basileus from Vera Evstafieva. It was typeface that inspired by speed writing in Cyrillic, and Vera tried to do speed writing Cyrillic. After it, she tried to do speed writing Latin and Greek. And to connect them together, you can see it was on this page was 3 different styles, 3 different scripts. Greek on the top, in the middle was Latin, and on the bottom was Cyrillic. And it looks too close to each other, but the same feeling. Wow. One more experiment with Cyrillic script from Oleg Matsuev. It was typeface Epiphany. It was the same script that inspired by speed writing. You can see it was very calligraphic. But the reality is different. Lowercase characters of Cyrillic, it looks like the same from uppercase. It duplicates, and it was very big problem. 26 letters from 33, it was real copies from uppercase and in lowercase. It was not different, and it was very strange to read text with letters that looks like uppercase. For example, in lowercase, in Latin, you can see it was just 7 letters from 26, repeats from uppercase to lowercase. It was really different. You can see more close how it looks. It just the same copied forms. But now I want to show you and some examples of Ukrainian Cyrillic revival movement, modern movement. A lot of type designers in Ukraine now trying to do unique Ukrainian style of Cyrillic. Actually, it was again by political reasons too, but I love what they do, and I want to show you some examples. First, need to look again to the history. It was on the beginning of 20th century when Ukraine identified as independent country first time, and Ukrainian type designers from the time tried to find something special forms for Ukrainian language that was actually different from Russian language. And one of them was Vladimir Narbut, who made this very interesting experiments with Cyrillic. He took some letters from Latin and used it for Cyrillic. You can see, for example, it was a letter N, and he real Latin letter N, and he used it as Cyrillic letter N. Just some examples of Narbut, some different forms. And a lot of type designers today use the same ideas from Narbut. You can see here was, for example, letter Z. It looks letter from Latin Z, but it looks more calligraphic. And you can see one more typeface from Kipriot, and he made here letter Z, for example, really like Latin, but he made the sender on the bottom of this letter. Or for example, here you can see the feeling of the letters. It was really different from Russian script, Russian letters, and Ukrainian type designers use some interesting, more strange forms for Ukrainian, and it made it more native for this country. For example, they use really Latin letter Y for letter U in Ukrainian, and on the bottom it was second style of it. It was calligraphic lettering from Vika and Vita Lopchiny. They made the same idea of letter N. For letter N in Cyrillic they use a letter from Latin form. Or for example, here was the modern typeface from Victor Haik, and you can see how very interesting it looks. For example, letter G, it has just 5 strokes, not 6. And it looks very interesting, and it works. It was very calligraphic, but you know, Greek script, it was calligraphic too, so why not? I really love it. Amazing. And it was really different. Maybe you know about Bulgarian script, Bulgarian Cyrillic. So I think we need maybe 10 years more, and we will have new Cyrillic script, Ukrainian Cyrillic, Bulgarian, Ukrainian, and traditional Cyrillic. It will be in the very, very fast future. And here is work of Alexei Chekal from my t-shirt, and he was written, "Word tried to catch me but didn't catch me," and it was again speed writing. It was very inspiring for me, this script. Well, that's it. Thank you so much for listening, seeing my examples. I will end my lecture by the same words what I started. Не вини, no war, нет войны. Thank you.
In case you want to spot the difference between Ukrainian text and Russian text, could be useful those days. A very simple way to do it is, you know, the famous E letter in Russian, in Cyrillic, is the one which looks like an N reversed, flipped. In Ukrainian, actually, they use, and this letter is relatively new. It's from early 20th century, before the Soviets. But in Ukrainian, actually, they use the old form, which, like the Latin E, the I letter. And that's it's a frequent letter, so it's easy to spot if you see some text in Cyrillic. Now, one last talk before conclusion. Live this with Noam Benata, who is also student in first year Master Type Design, and he will speak about a specific language that was quite big, which now is a bit less, let's say, probably, because of the rebirth of another one, partly. And so it was not a project done at ECAL, maybe continue next year, I don't know, because it was a project done at ZHDK in Zurich that convinced us to take Noam as a student.
Hi, Hala. Mein Name ist Noam und ich will dir bekennen mit mein Projekt. שלום, קוראים לי נועם ואני אציג לכם את הפרויקט שלי. Hi, my name is Noam. That was first Yiddish and then Hebrew. And I will introduce you my project and my research about the Yiddish language. Yeah, so specifically about my design research on this language. So I would like to start my presentation with this quote from the Nobel Prize awarded author. Maybe you know him, Isaac Bashevis Singer. I will not read it, but you can probably read it yourself. But to start, I would talk about the subject of my project and the concept behind it. So I will give you a quick introduction about the Yiddish language. So Yiddish is actually a language that was developed by the Jewish communities in Europe around the end of the 13th century. The language was actually first introduced in Germany and in the Central European areas of the Middle Age. And then because of emancipation and discrimination laws against Jewish communities in these areas, many Jews began to move to Eastern Europe, where the Yiddish language was actually massively developed and served as the everyday spoken language of these Jewish communities. Here in this image, you can actually see a page from Shemot Devarim, which means a name of things. It's a Yiddish, Hebrew, Latin, German dictionary and a thesaurus that was published in 1542. So the Yiddish language was actually aimed to create a common Jewish language across different countries and cultures and regional dialects. the language had an important impact on the relation between the communities whose origin was in different places with different languages and cultures and cultural backgrounds. So basically, many people came from different regions and they spoke their local language, but they wanted some way to communicate as a Jewish community. So back in the time, the biblical language of Hebrew was a common language that was already been spoken and understood by all these communities. But Hebrew was considered holy, and using it for everyday purposes was considered something that is like kind of violated. So here you can actually see one of the earliest polyglot Bible, which has, it's dated to 1517, and it has the original Hebrew holy text of the Bible together with translation into different languages. But actually, until the 16th century, Yiddish was only, because it was this way, it was considered only unwritten language almost, and a language that was only spoken and only orally. And various Yiddish writings from the time, basically, that we found and we can date today, they show actually the use of Latin letters, which they wrote the Yiddish text with. So the written Hebrew language was still considered sacred, and it was something that was not kind of allowed and was not respecting to use this kind of letter forms for the writing of this everyday language. And actually, with the development of education and the change of and religious division, basically, that started to take place, the development of the different streams in the religion, and the examination of religious principle, the idea of the use of the Hebrew script also changed. So people began to write and to use Yiddish not only as an oral language, because they also needed it for books and poems and like to basically use it as a normal kind of language, but they needed to write it. And they started to write different kinds of everyday text that was published in Yiddish. They started to write it in the Hebrew script. And the idea was to differentiate the cultural related Jewish texts, also like in the writing, from the European text of the other cultures. So the first handwritten texts actually were written using Hebrew, which was developed like in handwriting Hebrew. And it's these kind of forms that you can see here, and they are very different from the holy manuscripts and the calligraphic Hebrew that we know today. And then only in later days, they just went back to the shape of the holy manuscripts and the Bible, and they started to produce these Hebrew letters in mass, for like mass printing. But finally, it was actually, they created Hebrew letters, but they were first used in order to create Yiddish texts and actually not Hebrew texts. So the language was actually, because it was developed mainly in Central Europe, in German-speaking area, by Jews with knowledge and familiarity with biblical Hebrew, Yiddish is actually the language that combines the two languages. So by definition, it's actually a Germanic language. It's the only language in this kind of German language family that is not written in the Latin script. It has German grammatical character, but the linguistic influence and a lot of the vocabulary, so actually 30% of its vocabulary, it comes from Hebrew. So with the research on the subject, I was exposed to many Yiddish typographic visuals with a very defined character and style. And you could see that they are all kind of inspired from the Latin typographic that was made in the time in each of these areas where they were created. And these references actually emphasize very much the period, and they reflect kind of like the only visual conception that we know about Yiddish until now, so until this day. That's very much how we still perceive Yiddish in Israel or as Jewish people. So because I found these references very interesting and very inspiring, I started to kind of look at them and to see how I can extract those visual elements out of them. And since none of these typefaces that I showed before in the examples have been digitalized or brought basically to modern days, I try to see how I can take them to nowadays and bring their experimental style to the present. So after some experiments, I decided to go with 3 references and design 3 display typefaces in both Hebrew and Latin script. And with these typefaces, I wanted to bring the Yiddish language into a modern day perspective and to allow younger generations to relate to it. So the first typeface is inspired by a Jewish newsletter from 1919 from the area which is now Lithuania. And as you can see, it is characterized by its unique and ornamental style serif and the high contrast between the horizontal and the vertical axis. The second typeface is inspired by a hand-painted book cover from the 30s, which was actually made in the US. And the letters here take inspiration from the Gothic style of the era. They are characterized by the extreme pointy serifs on the top part of the stem with an ornamental serif similar to the old biblical Hebrew calligraphy. And the third typeface is inspired by a magazine cover from Germany, which is dated to 1923. And here the letters are basically all built using these geometric shapes, and the curves of the letters are achieved by the mix of different shapes without the use of any actual curved shape. So by taking these Hebrew scripts references back to the Latin, I actually managed to create this kind of closure. So I first tried to analyze the Hebrew script from each of these references and to extract the set of components that it was basically built on, and it was actually came from the Latin shapes and scripts. And with these components, I was able to build the entire alphabet for each of the scripts. So it's all both in Latin and Hebrew. And it generated this very unique and not very expected look and characteristic of the letters. So one of the interesting thing about this project, and from a more technical aspect of the typefaces, Yiddish, because it's essentially, in a way, you could say, German written in Hebrew letters, at least for a big part of the vocabulary of it, I actually used one of the benefits that we have now in modern day typefaces, which is open type features, to those of you who know these features. And it basically allowed me to program this code, which was then applied to each of the typefaces that I created. And it created this transliteration tool. So you can see it works basically in a way that it just takes the elements and the letters and creates this transition between the scripts. And it can be very easily activated by anyone who is using the typeface in most of the environments, or like, let's say, design environments. And it actually allows German speakers to read Hebrew written Yiddish text without actually understand or know how to read Hebrew. And in order to showcase the typefaces and to emphasize the history and the culture of the Yiddish language with its position in between German and Hebrew, I designed a publication that allows new audience to get exposed to the topic and to learn about it through the type. And the publication has 370 pages divided into 4 parts. So the first part is actually the vocabulary and origin of the words. And in this part, I try to analyze and to understand the vocabulary. And it consists of scans from an analyzation of a Yiddish lexicon from the 60s that I basically mapped the vocabulary from. And to differentiate the languages from one another, a color system can actually show how different scripts and how different languages actually inspired the language. So you can see, for example, the blue color is referred to Hebrew, and the Hebrew script, while the red is for words in German that are not anymore similar to the words in German. And so you can really see how most of the words that are not from the German, so that are not the same as in German nowadays, are actually coming from Hebrew. The second part of the book is a linguistic examination where it shows the different ways of pronunciation of similar words in German and Yiddish. And then it explains about the system we use in Hebrew and the Hebrew script, which is called Nikud. It's a vowel system that is used these kind of dots to basically create this kind of sound for the letters. And you can see here as well, you can really see how the blue parts are the parts that are related to the Hebrew script, and the red parts are related to the German, and you can see the connection between how they actually used in each of them, and how you would use it ideally, I mean, in a Latin environment. The third part of the book, it deals with the alphabet of each of the scripts, and where I analyzed basically the alphabet and the letters and compare them together by the sound they are actually creating. And then I suggested a set of new letters which are a combination between the different letters that create the same sound. So every time you can see the original letters in both scripts are shown in comparison, so you can see what makes this sound, or what combination of letters in Latin creates this sound. And then when flipping the page, you can see like a new suggested letter that is also made out of the same elements and constructed from the same components to create this kind of like ideal combination of the same sound with the two scripts. The last part of the book is actually a type specimen, so it's actually showcasing the 3 typefaces that I designed for this project. And you can see how they are very different, but you can also see that it combines different words that are sometimes similar or sometimes the same or have the same meaning but are very different in each of the languages. And the idea here was to show how these words can be perceived in different typefaces, but also with the meaning behind them. Yeah, to finish it, I would like to summarize it in 2 aspects. So first about the project. Yeah, I would start with the process because I basically use different design methods in order to examine this very complex subject with the tools that I know and I use as a designer. And I was able to work in different mediums to experience these different approaches. And I actually realized that with that, the complexity of designing in the context of multi-languages. And to summarize maybe the subject itself, yeah, I would like to quote again the author Itzhak Bashevis-Singer in his saying that Yiddish has not yet said its last word. And even though this saying is more than 40 years old, I think it's still relevant in our days. The Yiddish language is one of the more unique languages to be still kind of existing. It has very changed dramatically in the way we use it or in the way in who is actually using it. But it has gone through a lot of incarnations and locations, and it touched so many people in so many different ways in their life. And it's a very unique and elastic language that could really inspire, and it really deserves like a more research or like a more practice in the practices basically of language today. And yeah, thank you very much. Danke vielmal, großen Dank, and toda rabba.
So just a few words of conclusion. It's a part, there is a master type design at ECAL, and it's part of the studies include, we force students to work on a script, a writing system that none of them can read. Possibly to rebalance a bit that, you see the number of available fonts per writing system. It's an estimate, it's not, it's a rough estimate, but as, for instance, Chinese is the most widely spoken script, spoken language, in the world, and there are very, very few fonts. Bengali is quite widely spoken, and there is even less. So there will be, in the upcoming years, some need for type designers to enlarge the spectrum, let's say, and that's what we try to do in the master type design. Here you see some flags. That's where our students come from so far, the different countries. It creates a good emulation between students, they see scripts they've never seen, they see different stuff, and motivate some of them to work on those questions. For instance, last year we had Lucille Billot, she's French, she doesn't speak Greek, she doesn't speak Russian or anything, but she decided to do a typeface in the 3 scripts, and she started with the Greek first, because usually you start with the Latin and then you develop the Cyrillic because it's quite easy. And then you go for the Greek, and after all the struggle you have, you stop. But she started with the Greek, and you see little details matter, that it could be the same shape, but it could not also. Another interesting project of last year is this one by Chachi Chao. He took the Chinese fonts for which you have thousands of characters to design. He took it the other way. That is, instead of having a machine generating shapes for you, he looked at existing Chinese Ming font. That's what you have on the left side. It's let's say classical shape. And with every existing Ming font, you have a Latin counterpart. And you can see in the second column that the different Latin fonts made to match with the Chinese are very different from each other, and quite frequently very bad. So his idea was to design one Latin font that you have on the third column, which is a variable font, a technology that allows you design 2 extremes, like the thin version and the thick version, and you can have all the, what's the word? Intermediate versions. So one axis is the weight and one axis is the contrast. And with those 2, he can match all the existing Ming typefaces quite well. Instead of drawing, 12 times 30,000 characters, he just drew one Latin font, and the Latin is following the Chinese. So this is developed in a class we do every year, called Non-Legitur. You can see it written here. So this is a manuscript of the 15th century of the university in Caen, in Normandy. It's a copy of a regulation of the king. And it was very common back then, when people were copying Latin texts, if there was some words in another script, generally Greek, they were writing Grecum est non legitur. It's Greek, I cannot read. So that's non-legitur is the name of that class. We did work in the past on Cyrillic, on Arabic. We did a session on Greek. Last year we worked on the Syriac script with a nice interpretation of this very not known script. We had a day dedicated to it here at the Fondation Baudemer. For instance, how do you translate these super large O into a script that have no such shapes? So here the choice was to make the vowels super thin, the little signs on top of letters. How to translate a condensed typeface for a script in which the readability is mostly done by the width of the letter. So at some point you cannot condense them that much. And so all those researches have been put together in the publication. That is, you can find it at the shop here at the Fondation Bodmer, or online as well on ECAL shop, of all the production of the students, the reflection, and all the question of what does it mean to design for a script you cannot read. And this year, thanks to also collaboration with l'ABEC in Vevey, we have Irene Vlachou, invited professor for the semester, who will deal with what, when you don't know something, when you don't understand something in English, it is Greek to you. But not everyone agrees on this statement in Europe. For French, I would rather say c'est du chinois rather than, yeah, not because of you. But so I let the final words to Irene to introduce what she's going to do this semester.
Right. Hello. Can you hear me? Okay, that's really bizarre. So first of all, thank you everybody for showing up on a Sunday afternoon on a sunny day. I mean, this is amazing. The weather has been crazy. Nice. And thanks Mathieu for the invitation and l'ABEC for hosting me, and everything has been wonderful. So I have written a small talk to show and some slides to show you, but to be honest, things have changed in the last 2 hours when students were talking about their own projects, and there was an issue that I wasn't sure if I want to get into, about the language appropriation and the cultural appropriation that you can do through typeface design. But I think, I'm a Greek person doing Greek fonts, so I think I should kind of mention it at least. Anyway, this semester in ECAL, the students are going to deal with a different script, and that's the Greek script. And the fortunate thing is that none of them reads Greek or has any idea about the Greek, so it's kind of a complete new script to them, and I bet they don't even really care about Greek, which is also a good thing. Because in real life, you might have to deal with a project that you don't like or it's not close to your heart, but you need to learn how to do that. So there is, in the last years, I mean, I've been a type designer for 15 years now, almost, maybe more, I don't know. Tom, how many are we around? Something like that. Anyway, thanks for coming, by the way, Tom, friend and colleague and classmate. So anyway, so yes, I've been around for 15 years doing type design, but it's only in the last decade, maybe even less, that people actually are talking about cultural appropriation through type design. So to explain that, it's just, am I Greek? And I have to do just Greek, and that's that. It has been, I don't know if people are getting online, but there was an article about from the Alphabetis, which is a women's organization on typeface design. Just women getting together, talking about stuff, and they published an article on the event of the American uprisings last year, and there were many discussions about what the girls wrote and what is actually happening. And to be honest, there's a big contradiction about that, and there are many points that they made in this article. It's really interesting to read about what does it mean for a non-native to design a script that is not familiar with, and does that show a privilege on getting this project? Does it show, is it going to be good? Is the quality going to be affected? Is the feedback of a local going to be enough? There are many issues that they were mentioning. Even basic stuff like, I'm getting the job from someone from a poorer country than me. Let's assume that I'm not Greek and I'm come from a rich country. Anyway, but as much as I understand the whole point of this article, and I agree with most of these things, the problem is that they all kind of keeps moving, and projects are happening, and companies are giving projects to non-natives to design. So even, I mean, we need some time to decide on that and how we're going to deal with that as a community if this thing exists. But in the meantime, I think we kind of have to act, and we can act in many ways as type designers through our community, to discuss it, to inform our colleagues about our worries. And as educators, we need to teach the students to think twice before they touch something, or what I'm trying to do this semester here is to make them, not make them, but to teach them to find a methodology on approaching something that they're not familiar with. So this year, I mean, I have done some other workshops before about Greek, but this year I'm trying something new. I hope Mathieu doesn't kill me, and I hope we have a nice result. But this year, it's a bit unorthodox the way I'm starting teaching this thing. I'm not going to give them any rules, and I'm not going to give them good examples to follow. I want them to figure out these things by themselves in a way that a local would do. So I want to give them the feeling of a local. So we start by some writing exercises, as if they're, kids in the primary school, the do's and don'ts. But at the same time, we're going to also look different material. We're going to, before the material, we're also trying to draw in different, with different tools. Markers, kalams, pens, anything that can happen. Because in Greek, everything has happened. People have kind of used almost every writing tool. So yes, this actually affects the ductus of the letter, the contrast, the rhythm of the text. So they have to experiment on that. And at the same time, of course, they will see historical examples, they will see manuscripts, incubabula, and they're going to see what are the trends in multiscriptural or multilingual publishing. This is, I think it was a 17th century dictionary for Greek, French, and Italian, published in Istanbul. So that's an interesting approach. And then this was another trilingual text from Documenta 14, this art fest that happened between Kassel and Athens in 2017. And that was the small program, a leaflet, almost like a fanzine, before the actual exhibition started in Greece. There was 7 months of planning and discussions that they named it the Parliament of Bodies, and people discussing about how democracy works in the south, in the north of Europe, everywhere on the planet. And that was a trilingual publication that was very good too. Of course, we couldn't go through anything unless we actually see things like codices. And Bodmer has a beautiful collection of manuscripts, and we're really lucky to access that through the eCodices website that has all the manuscripts belonging to Swiss collections. And this is an 11th century New Testament manuscript, and I really like this one because the scriber on the side, he wasn't sure about his letter form, so he's trying many of them, and he's just making doodles of stuff. And at some point, he draws some horses that, from the text, I can assure you that it doesn't mention any horses. It's just there for fun. So apart from material like that, we're going to see printers specimens. That's one from 1908, I think, 901. One of the first printers in Greece imported type, cast type, stall type. You know how this thing works. It's a business that we rip off each other to a certain extent. And this is how Nebbiolo, the Italian guys, saw Greek 10 years later. So these are two different approaches on how to design Greek. And we are also going to see with the student books from the last 100 years. I mean, I brought some with me. I couldn't bring my entire library. And of course, newspapers, from old ones to Greek versions of New York Times and international press to websites. How the news are read today through devices, from phones to iOSs and Macintosh crap and stuff. And after this lovely education is over here in beautiful Switzerland, we go back to Greece with the students, and then the students, they can see how actually the Greek script is used. Not necessarily good examples, but this is what it is. We have calligraphic things, we have funny script signs in old storefronts, and we have street signs, and they have to know all of that in order to make their own minds about how the Greek should be designed. And all of these results, together with their work in ECAL, plus a diary that they have to keep during the trip, they will be presented in a small exhibition that we run on the side of the conference, of the 8th Typographic Conference in Thessaloniki. So yep, you are all welcome there. It's going to be very hot and humid, so I have to warn you before you decide to come. And that's all from me. Mille merci.
Au nom de l'ECAL, je souhaite encore une fois vous remercier de votre présence et je vous souhaite une bonne continuation. Merci beaucoup.